They say every queen needs her crown, but what happens when that crown slips and the king who once protected her walks away? Tonight, hip-hop streets are buzzing, fans are stunned, and social media is on fire because rumors are exploding. That Easy the Block captain has officially dumped Remy Ma right after she lost her alimony case. It's the breakup no one saw coming, but maybe everyone should have. From red carpets to rap battles, Easy and Remy were the power duo who defied the odds, two warriors of the mic who turned their bond into a movement. But behind the scenes, insiders claim things were crumbling faster than anyone imagined. And when that courtroom verdict came down, when Remy's long-fought alimony case didn't go her way, Easy apparently decided he was done carrying the emotional weight of it all. Sources close to the couple say it wasn't just the legal loss, it was everything that came with it. The sleepless nights, the arguments over money, the public embarrassment, the whispers that Easy was only sticking around because of Remy's fame. And now it seems those whispers have turned into reality. One insider told us Easy felt like he was being dragged into her storm. He stood by her through everything, but after that courtroom moment, he looked at her differently. It wasn't love anymore. It was pity, and he couldn't live like that. Fans online are losing it. Some are siding with Remy, saying she gave Easy his platform, his spotlight, his name in the game. Others argue that Easy just reclaimed his independence, refusing to be part of someone else's downfall. Either way, the hip-hop world is split. And what's really wild? The tension had apparently been building for months. Heated text arguments, secret studio sessions, unfollowing sprees, and one explosive confrontation that allegedly took place backstage after a show in New York. So what really went down? Did Easy coldly walk away from Remy when she needed him most, or was this the final act in a toxic love story that should have ended long ago? Stay tuned, because what we've uncovered next will change how you see both of them forever. In the weeks leading up to the courtroom decision, everything about Easy the Block captain and Remy Ma's relationship seemed like a test of loyalty under fire. What once looked like an unshakable bond had quietly become a battlefield of pride, ego, and resentment. Insiders began to notice the shift: how Easy would arrive at events alone, how Remy would linger backstage instead of standing beside him in public, and how their smiles never quite reached their eyes anymore. What had been love's confident glow had dimmed into a calculated performance for the cameras. The tension began long before the verdict. Friends recall that the legal battle over Remy's alimony case had turned into a shadow that followed her everywhere. She was constantly on edge, calculating her next move, fearing that every public appearance could become ammunition in the court of public opinion. Easy, meanwhile, was focused on maintaining his rising momentum in the rap world. While she was fighting for financial stability, he was fighting for artistic respect. And somewhere in the noise, they began to move in opposite directions. Easy's success was supposed to be their shared victory, but it started feeling like a wedge between them. As his name grew hotter, whispers circulated that he owed his fame to her connections. That talk irritated him more than anyone realized. It wasn't just about pride, it was about identity. For someone who had built his brand on being authentic, raw and self-made, being labeled as Remy's project burned deeply. Yet, Remy felt equally wounded by the idea that her legacy had somehow become a burden to him. Each felt unappreciated by the other, and neither knew how to bridge that invisible divide. When Remy's alimony case began taking over headlines, the strain became public. Every blogger, gossip outlet, and podcast had an opinion. Some portrayed her as a resilient woman fighting against an unjust system. Others mocked her for financial mismanagement and accused her of clinging to her past fame. The noise became unbearable. Fans began tagging Easy in posts, demanding that he speak up or defend her. But silence was his answer, and that silence spoke louder than words. Behind closed doors, Remy was unraveling under the pressure. The woman once known for her fearlessness now carried exhaustion in her eyes. She was drained physically and emotionally while trying to keep her composure. In public, people closest to her say she'd expected Easy to be her anchor, but instead, he began to pull away. He buried himself in work, spending more time in the studio and on the road, justifying it as business. Yet those closest to him knew it was avoidance. The relationship had become a weight he didn't know how to carry. When the verdict finally came down, when Remy officially lost the alimony case, the shock hit like a thunderclap. For her, it wasn't just a financial loss, it was humiliation. Years of fighting had collapsed in one cold legal announcement. She felt exposed, defeated, and alone. Meanwhile, Easy's reaction was strikingly calm. Those who witnessed that, they say he barely spoke, but his detachment said everything. He looked at her not as his partner, but as someone he no longer recognized. In the following days, Remy tried to regain control of the narrative. She posted cryptic messages online, referencing strength and survival. Her captions were vague but heavy with subtext. Yet, no post could hide the growing distance between her and Easy. Fans noticed immediately that he had stopped liking or commenting on her updates. It was the digital silence that screamed betrayal. For a generation fluent in social media subtleties, that small act was confirmation that something major had broken behind the scenes. Then came the studio rumors. Producers began whispering that Easy was spending late nights recording tracks that sounded suspiciously personal. He wasn't naming names, but every lyric dripped with resentment and independence. Listeners could feel it. His bars were sharper, his tone colder. It was as if he was purging something, trying to break free from an invisible hold. Industry insiders knew exactly what it meant. When a rapper starts recording pain, a breakup is already written. In Fate, Remy's circle tried to hold things together. Her friends urged her to take a break, to focus on herself, to avoid public confrontations. But she couldn't hide her frustration. She felt abandoned, especially after all she had invested emotionally, financially, and professionally into Easy's journey. When he started skipping joint appearances, it felt like a betrayal she couldn't ignore. She had stood by him when he was just another name trying to climb the ranks. Now that he had achieved visibility, it seemed he no longer needed the woman who once championed him. By the end of that month, whispers had turned into headlines. Blogs began running stories with sensational titles like Trouble in Paradise? And has Easy moved on already? Every outlet had a source, every tweet claimed insider knowledge, but no one had the full truth. What they didn't realize was that the split wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, almost surgical. Easy didn't announce it. He simply stopped showing up, stopped calling, and stopped pretending. It was as if he erased her presence from his daily life. For Remy, that silence was the deepest cut. The inner circle noticed something else, a shift in Easy's energy. He was dressing differently, speaking differently, projecting a colder image in interviews. When asked about his personal life, he dodged with vague answers, smiling as though nothing was wrong. But insiders knew that every word was a mask. Beneath that calm was resentment, a quiet conviction that he had carried someone else's burden for too long. He wanted to be free, not just from Remy, but from the image that came with her. Meanwhile, Remy's reputation began to suffer. The failed alimony case had already dented her public standing, but losing Easy added emotional insult to legal injury. Commentators began speculating that her career was in decline, that she had lost her influence both in the industry and in love. Fans were torn, some sympathized, remembering her struggles and comeback story. Others were harsh, accusing her of mismanaging her personal and professional life. Every podcast, every live stream, every gossip page seemed to feed off her pain, turning her downfall into entertainment. Easy, on the other hand, began moving like a man with something to prove. He booked more shows, made more media appearances, and positioned himself as the unstoppable underdog who had survived drama and distraction. Without ever naming names, he implied that he had cut ties with negativity to focus on greatness. It was a rebranding that worked. The same fans who once saw him as Remy's partner now saw him as a self-made survivor. His following grew, and the narrative shifted in his favor. But what the public didn't see was the guilt. Those who were close to Easy noticed that he wasn't sleeping well. He was restless, pacing through nights, haunted by the way he had ended things. Despite everything, he respected Remy deeply. Leaving her hadn't been an act of cruelty, it had been an act of self-preservation. Yet even as he tried to justify it, he couldn't shake the memory of what they'd built together. Love, once fierce and proud, had turned into a battlefield, where both lost pieces of themselves. Remy, too, was haunted. Her pride refused to let her reach out, but her silence was heavy with regret. She spent more time with family, keeping appearances low-key, trying to heal from the humiliation of both the courtroom loss and the breakup that followed. But everywhere she went, people whispered, Every question, every glance reminded her that the world was watching her stumble. For a woman who once stood as a symbol of strength, being pitied was unbearable. The hip-hop community couldn't look away. What had started as a private heartbreak had become a cultural conversation. Bloggers debated whether Eazy had been justified in leaving or whether he had abandoned Remy in her weakest moment. Fans dissected every lyric, every public move, searching for hidden meanings. Even their peers in the industry began to take sides, quietly aligning themselves with one or the other. The divide grew deeper, turning what had been a romance into a public feud by implication. By the time summer arrived, both had transformed their pain into performance. Remy began hinting at new projects, emphasizing themes of independence and rebirth. Eazy dropped back-to-back freestyles about loyalty and freedom. Though neither named the other, their creative output became an unspoken conversation. Every release felt like a response, every line a coded message. The tension between them played out through music, giving fans more fuel for speculation. Still, the truth remained simple. The courtroom defeat had been the breaking point. The loss didn't just strip Remy of money, it stripped her of security. And in the aftermath, Eazy couldn't handle the emotional fallout. He wanted peace, she needed support. But their definitions of love had shifted. What once connected them now separated them. Yet beneath the noise, there was something more tragic. Both were fighting the same enemy, public perception, but from different corners. Neither could win without the other losing. For Eazy, breaking free meant reclaiming his individuality. For Remy, holding on meant proving she wasn't broken. The tragedy was that neither could admit how much they still cared. And as the months rolled on, the silence between them became deafening. It wasn't marked by dramatic confrontations or viral outbursts, it was quiet, cold, and final. To the outside world, it looked like a clean break. But to those who knew them personally, it was a slow bleed that hadn't stopped. Still, this was only the beginning. Because as the gossip world would soon discover, Eazy's decision to walk away didn't just end a relationship, it triggered a storm that neither of them could control. What came next would shake the foundations of their reputations, their friendships, and even their fan bases. Part 2 picks up right as that storm begins to unfold, when private pain turns public and when the truth behind Eazy's exit finally starts to surface. It didn't close a chapter, it opened a new one filled with chaos, suspicion, and emotional warfare. The breakup that had once been whispered about in private circles exploded into a full-blown saga across social media. The hip-hop community thrives on narratives, and this one was irresistible. The mentor turned lover, the protege turned star, and the quiet implosion that threatened to rewrite both their legacies. Within days, the internet was flooded with posts dissecting every move they made. Fan accounts began uploading timeline videos showing how their relationship had gone from power couple to ghosted silence. Clips from old interviews resurfaced moments where Eazy praised Remy, or where she defended him on public platforms now reframed as evidence of manipulation or foreshadowing. Bloggers turned into investigators, crafting conspiracy theories about why Eazy left right after her legal defeat. Eazy himself remained quiet, but that silence only amplified speculation. His recent performances began attracting more attention than ever. Each lyric, each gesture, each look into the camera was treated like a coded message to Remy. Some fans insisted his songs were apologies hidden under metaphors. Others claimed they were his declaration of independence. Either way, the narrative was alive and feeding the online frenzy. Remy's team tried to control the damage. They reached out to select media outlets, trying to redirect the focus toward her upcoming projects. But every interview turned into a minefield. Reporters wanted gossip, not growth. Every question circled back to Eazy, every conversation seemed designed to remind her of the wound she was trying to heal. She tried to respond with grace, keeping her tongue calm and her words vague, but behind that composure was exhaustion. It felt like the world was refusing to let her move on. Eazy's circle wasn't faring much better. While his fanbase expanded, his inner team noticed a tension he couldn't shake. The more his career grew, the more he seemed haunted by what he'd left behind. He was trying to celebrate new wins, but each victory came with backlash. Critics accused him of exploiting the breakup to boost his image. Comment sections overflowed with divided opinions, some calling him cold-hearted, others praising him for prioritizing his peace. It was a love story turned into a battleground, and no one knew who the real villain was. As the weeks passed, the story evolved into something darker. Anonymous accounts began leaking supposed insider information. Screenshots, half-truths, and blurry photos started circulating online. One particularly viral post claimed that Easy had been secretly seeing someone new long before the split. Another alleged that Remy had been the one to initiate the separation after discovering a betrayal. The internet didn't care about accuracy, it cared about drama. And the more outrageous the claim, the faster it spread. Behind the noise, Remy withdrew from the public eye. She stopped attending industry events, declined interviews, and limited her social appearances to a tight circle of loyal friends. Her silence was interpreted as weakness by some, but those close to her knew it was survival. She was regrouping, quietly rebuilding, and waiting for the storm to pass. She spent more time at home, focusing on her family and pouring her emotions into creative outlets. It was a period of introspection, though the world refused to give her peace. Meanwhile, Easy continued to ascend. His performances became more intense, his lyrics more introspective. Even without mentioning her name, the undertones of heartbreak and resentment were clear. Fans could feel that his art was being shaped by pain. The breakup had, ironically, given him the emotional rawness that made his music resonate even deeper. Every track seemed to tell a piece of their story, and listeners connected with the authenticity behind his verses. But what they didn't realize was that every song also reopened old wounds. As months passed, their worlds continued to drift apart, but destiny had other plans. In an unexpected twist, both artists were booked to perform at the same major hip-hop festival. The lineup announcement sent shockwaves through fans. Speculation ran wild. Would they acknowledge each other on stage? Would there be tension backstage? Every gossip outlet prepared for a potential showdown. When the night finally came, the energy was electric. Thousands of fans packed the venue, eager to witness history. Remy performed first, her set focused on empowerment and resilience. She radiated confidence, her performance crisp and commanding. The crowd roared with admiration, especially when she delivered bars that hinted at betrayal and comeback. Many took those lyrics as a message to Easy, a declaration that she had survived the fall and was stronger than ever. Easy's set followed shortly after. He stepped onto the stage with the same confidence that had made him a rising star, but his presence carried an undercurrent of tension. The crowd was divided, half cheering him on, half watching to see if he'd address the elephant in the room. He didn't mention her name, but his entire setlist felt like a carefully constructed statement. The energy between them, though unseen, was palpable. After the event, clips of both performances went viral. Fans began comparing their lyrics, interpreting them as indirect responses to one another. Comment sections turned into virtual debate rooms. Some claimed Remy had won the night, reclaiming her power. Others said Easy's control and composure proved he had truly moved on. What none of them knew was that backstage, the atmosphere was thick with awkward silence. They hadn't spoken, hadn't even crossed paths, but both had felt the other's presence. That night reignited a media storm. Every headline screamed about the tension between them. Old wounds were reopened, and new rumors began to surface. Some claimed that mutual friends were trying to reconcile them privately. Others insisted the distance had grown too wide to bridge. The narrative had evolved beyond love and loss. It had become a modern parable about fame, pride, and survival. Behind the scenes, the emotional toll was taking its course. Remy's friends described her as reflective but guarded. She had accepted the breakup, but the public's obsession with her private pain made healing nearly impossible. Every time she tried to move forward, someone reminded her of the past. Still, she remained determined to reinvent herself. She poured her energy into her next project, something deeply personal, intended to show the world that she was more than gossip fodder. Easy, meanwhile, was battling a different kind of pressure. Success brought visibility, but also scrutiny. Every collaboration, every social post, every lyric was dissected for clues about his emotional state. Even when he tried to focus on his craft, interviewers couldn't resist asking about Remy. He learned to navigate the questions with calm deflection, but internally it wore him down. He had left to find peace, yet peace seemed further away than ever. As autumn approached, both found themselves standing at crossroads. The noise of the internet had quieted slightly, but the damage lingered. Relationships had shifted. People who once supported them as a couple were now cautious, choosing sides or staying neutral. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a cultural split that divided fans, collaborators, and communities. The story had become bigger than them, a living entity that fed on speculation and emotion. And then came the unexpected. A leaked document surfaced online, an alleged financial statement suggesting that Easy might have indirectly benefited from Remy's resources during their time together. The file wasn't verified, but it reignited controversy. Critics accused him of hypocrisy, saying he had profited from her success before claiming independence. Easy's camp immediately dismissed the leak as fake, but the damage was done. Hashtags questioning his credibility began trending. Suddenly, the narrative that had once favored him began to tilt. Remy's silence during this time was strategic. Her team refused to comment, but sources revealed that she watched the drama unfold with quiet satisfaction. It wasn't revenge, it was relief. For the first time since the breakup, public opinion was no longer stacked entirely against her. The same media that once mocked her loss was now questioning Easy's integrity. It was poetic justice in motion. Even if unspoken, Easy, frustrated by the renewed backlash, began to isolate himself again. His public appearances grew limited. His social media activity dropped. Insiders said he was spending more time reflecting on how quickly fame could turn on someone. The lesson was painful, but necessary. Loyalty in the industry was fickle, and perception was everything. The saga had officially evolved beyond a breakup story. It had become a study of power, reputation, and resilience. Two people once united by ambition were now defined by how they handled the ruins of that union. Fans had taken sides, but in truth, both were just navigating the same storm in different ways. As winter set in, the narrative took another turn. Remy announced a documentary project exploring the pressures of fame and the cost of vulnerability in hip-hop. Though she didn't name anyone directly, the trailer alone set social media ablaze. People speculated it would include references to her relationship with Easy, turning the project into one of the most anticipated releases of the year. For Easy, this was both a threat and a challenge. He knew the story was far from over. Whatever she revealed or didn't reveal would once again shape how the world viewed him. And deep down, he knew there were still truths that hadn't been told. Part 3 begins right where this leaves off, with Remy's bold public comeback and Easy's struggle to protect his image as their silent war spills into the open. The silence that followed that press conference was not peace, it was pressure. Every corner of social media throbbed with speculation, memes, and raw emotion. Easy's name trended for days, not for music, but for mystery. Fans dissected every facial twitch, every delayed post, every cryptic lyric snippet he dropped online. To them, his silence was a language of its own, a cold, calculated message that he was done protecting Remy Ma. Meanwhile, Remy found herself living inside a storm she couldn't control. The court loss had drained her financially, but the emotional cost was worse. The woman once feared for her words was now trapped inside a narrative written by everyone but her. Paparazzi lenses glared from across the street, and every time she opened her phone, another headline twisted the knife. Remy alone again? Easy cuts ties for good? Friends say he's done saving her. Inside her circle, loyalty began to fracture. Some longtime friends quietly unfollowed her to avoid the online backlash. Brand deals paused pending further review. Even the podcast that once celebrated her comeback postponed its next episode, citing production delays. For the first time in years, Remy wasn't in control. She was the story, and that scared her more than any battle rap ever had. Easy, on the other hand, moved like a man who'd accepted his next chapter before anyone else even saw it coming. Rumors said he'd flown to Atlanta. Others claimed Miami. What mattered was that he was seen smiling again, something fans hadn't witnessed in months. The smile wasn't warmth, though, it was release. The kind of quiet confidence that comes after surviving a personal earthquake. Industry insiders started whispering that his next project would expose everything. Unnamed producers claimed he'd recorded new verses filled with veiled jabs and coded pain. One particularly dramatic leak described a track allegedly titled Paper Chains, where he compared love to a legal contract binding until the fine print breaks you. It was never confirmed, but fans didn't care. They filled the blanks with their own imagination. The myth had already grown larger than the truth. While Easy regained traction, Remy struggled to rebuild what was left of her image. She tried to return to the studio, but nothing sounded right. Every verse carried a shadow of self-defense. Her once razor-sharp confidence was duller, cracked by exhaustion. In interviews, she looked composed, but the energy behind her eyes told a different story, that of a woman trying to rewrite her own narrative before the world finished it for her. Behind closed doors, lawyers met quietly to finalize separation clauses, unshowed assets, and unwritten agreements. There were rumors that Easy wanted nothing, no money, no public sympathy, no revenge. That refusal to engage made the story even wilder. Commentators called it the ultimate dump, walking away not just from a partner but from the circus itself. But public silence comes with a price. Every unspoken truth turns into speculation, and speculation becomes entertainment. Gossip. Blogs released exclusive voice notes, fake screenshots, and blurry photos that blurred fact and fiction. One claimed to show Remy crying in her car. Another alleged Easy was already seeing someone new. No one knew what was real anymore, yet everyone believed what fit their bias. The hip-hop community, notorious for taking sides, began drawing invisible lines. Some supported Easy, saying he was protecting his peace after being dragged through a legal and emotional battlefield. Others defended Remy, insisting she was a victim of both systemic bias and personal betrayal. The internet didn't care about nuance, it wanted war. As days bled into weeks, Easy returned to performing. His first show post-breakup was electric, raw, and unexpectedly emotional. The crowd screamed every lyric, but he performed like a man purging his soul. When he left the stage, sweat and tears mingled on his face. He didn't speak a word, just raised his hand toward the crowd and walked away. That single gesture became iconic overnight, with fans captioning it, "Goodbye doesn't always need words." Remy watched clips of that performance alone in her living room. Her reaction wasn't anger, it was silence. Because deep down, she knew what that raised hand meant. It wasn't disrespect. It was closure. He'd moved on without a speech, without an apology, without permission. And in that moment, the weight of her losses, financial, emotional, relational, finally pressed down all at once. Meanwhile, publicists tried to spin narratives on both sides. Some claimed reconciliation talks were happening privately. Others swore it was over for good. The contradiction kept the story alive, feeding the public's hunger for drama. The longer the truth stayed hidden, the bigger the myth grew. One night, Easy posted a simple caption on Instagram: "Freedom has no refund." Within minutes, the post went viral. Fans interpreted it as confirmation of the breakup. Comment sections exploded. Celebrities quietly liked the post. And while Easy didn't name anyone, the subtext was deafening. It was the digital equivalent of a mic drop. Remy tried to respond indirectly, showing old photos of herself smiling beside motivational quotes. But the internet, ruthless as ever, twisted even those gestures. They accused her of playing victim, of chasing sympathy. The same audience that once cheered her resilience now weaponized her vulnerability against her. Yet beneath all the noise, there was something deeply human about the chaos. Two people who had once shared stage lights and private jokes were now learning how to exist separately under the same relentless spotlight. Every move they made, every silence they held, became a public performance of heartbreak. In private moments, Easy's friends described him as distant, focused, but quieter. Fame had always been loud around him, but now his focus was surgical. He began mentoring younger artists, warning them about emotional contracts and public loyalty. To many, it sounded like coded lessons from his own scars. Remy, meanwhile, began writing again. But this time, her pen bled vulnerability. Insiders said she was working on a book, not music, a memoir-style project exploring what love costs when power and pride collide. Whether that was true or not, the rumor itself reminded people of who she really was, a survivor. Even in ruins. Months passed, and what began as gossip matured into legend. The breakup became a case study in the cost of fame, loyalty, and ego. YouTubers analyzed timelines, podcasters debated motives, and fans continued to argue in endless comment threads. Some saw Easy's silence as maturity, others called it manipulation. Some pitied Remy, others feared her comeback. But deep underneath the spectacle, both were evolving in opposite directions. Eazy's name started trending not just in music but in brand circles, endorsement deals, collaborations, and interviews about staying grounded amid chaos. Remy's public presence diminished, but whispers of her return grew louder. Everyone knew that when she came back, she wouldn't come softly. Still, the emotional fracture between them lingered like an unhealed scar in the culture. Every time Eazy dropped a new verse, people searched for subliminals. Every time Remy posted a quote, people decoded it. They had become mirror images in the public eye, reflections of love gone wrong, each trying to reclaim their narrative before the other one defined it permanently. By late summer, the gossip seemed to fade. The internet found new scandals, new heartbreaks. Yet for those who'd followed the saga from day one, the silence was suspicious, too quiet, too staged. Rumors began again, this time darker, that behind the scenes, a final confrontation had taken place. No cameras, no statements, just two people standing in the aftermath of everything they'd built and destroyed together. And as the whispers grew louder, fans realized something chilling. This wasn't over. It had only evolved. The storm hadn't passed. It had gone underground, waiting for its next eruption. Because in the world of fame, endings are illusions. Every silence hides another headline. The silence that spread after those underground rumors wasn't calm. It was anticipation. The culture had learned to recognize that kind of quiet. It was the same stillness before a diss track drops, before a scandal breaks, before a career-shifting revelation hits the internet like lightning. For months, fans had speculated, debated, and exhausted every possible theory about Eazy and Remy. But now something new was coming. Everyone could feel it. And then, without warning, it began again. It started as a whisper, a post from an anonymous industry page claiming that Eazy and Remy had been spotted together in Los Angeles. No photo, no proof, just a single caption that read, "Closed doors can't hide old flames." Within hours, the post had spread across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube thumbnails. Comment sections flooded with disbelief and curiosity. Some said it was clickbait, others swore it was real. Whatever it was, the world wanted to believe it. For Remy, the rumor hit like a cruel joke. She had spent months rebuilding her composure, reclaiming control over her image, and trying to focus on her work. The last thing she wanted was to be dragged back into a narrative she was finally learning to escape. Her team urged her to ignore it, but the damage was already done. Old wounds reopened, old assumptions resurfaced, and the internet, as always, decided the story for her. Eazy's camp remained quiet. Not a word, not a denial, not even a cryptic post. And in that silence, the public imagination went wild. Some believed they were secretly reconciling. Others thought they were having a final private confrontation. The possibilities were endless, and every theory only made the myths stronger. Behind the scenes, there had been a meeting, but not the romantic reunion people imagined. According to sources close to both camps, it was business, not love. A documentary project was in the works, and the producers wanted Eazy's perspective for the final cut. After weeks of indecision, he had agreed to meet with Remy's team privately to discuss his involvement. But what was meant to be a controlled, professional conversation ended up reopening emotional doors neither of them were ready for. The meeting itself was brief but tense. Two people who once shared everything now couldn't even share a moment without the air thickening. Every word felt loaded, every glance carried history. When it ended, there were no goodbyes, just two separate exits leading back into two separate worlds. But someone in that meeting room talked. Someone leaked that they had made peace. And from that whisper, the wildfire began. By the next morning, gossip outlets were declaring a secret reconciliation. Fan edits flooded YouTube, romantic montages of their old interviews spliced with the rumor headline. It was the digital equivalent of wishful thinking, a fandom refusing to let go of the love story they had once idolized. But what they didn't know is that this new round of rumors would trigger something far more dangerous than heartbreak. It would trigger retaliation. Because while the internet was busy celebrating the possibility of a reunion, Eazy was quietly preparing a revelation of his own. For months, he had stayed silent, avoiding interviews, avoiding confrontation, avoiding the chaos. But now he had decided to reclaim the story in the only way he knew how: through music. Late one night, he posted a teaser clip from his upcoming album. The caption was simple: "No one knows the truth until I rhyme it." The clip itself was less than 10 seconds long, but it was enough to send shockwaves through the culture. His tone was darker, sharper, almost vengeful. It was clear he wasn't finished speaking. The internet exploded again. Hashtags trended worldwide. Fans dissected the few bars they could hear in the preview, claiming he was finally ready to tell his side. Others warned that he was reigniting a war better left buried. Even Remy's supporters grew nervous, fearing that her reputation, already fragile, would take another hit. And then came the full track. No features, no fluff. Just raw storytelling over a haunting beat. He didn't name names, but everyone knew who it was about. The lyrics painted a picture of betrayal, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion. He framed himself not as the villain or the victim, but as the survivor of a love that had turned into a legal and emotional war zone. Within hours of release, the song hit 1 million streams. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Fans praised his vulnerability, critics called it petty, and Remy's name trended again even though she hadn't said a word. The industry split in half all over again. Some said Eazy was brave for speaking his truth. Others accused him of exploiting private pain for clout. Remy's silence stretched for days. The world waited for a response that never came. Instead, she focused on her upcoming documentary, which had now become one of the most anticipated releases in entertainment media. The timing was suspicious to some, almost poetic. Eazy's song had reopened the wound. Her film would now tell the other side. The stage was set for a cultural collision. When the documentary finally dropped, it broke the internet. It wasn't an expose, it wasn't revenge, it was reflection. For the first time, Remy spoke honestly, not about Eazy by name, but about heartbreak, disappointment, and learning to let go of a love that had stopped being safe. Her tone was calm but heavy with emotion. There were no attacks, no accusations, just painful honesty about loss, pride, and regret. Audiences were stunned. Critics called it her most powerful work in years. Viewers cried, debated, and empathized. For many, it was the closure they needed. But for others, especially those loyal to Eazy, it was a subtle form of revenge. They claimed she had painted herself as the hero of a story she helped destroy. The online war reignited, fiercer than before. Eazy didn't respond publicly. This time, he didn't post, didn't perform, didn't comment. But insiders said he was furious. Not because of what she said, but because of how the world received it. She had managed to flip the narrative once again, becoming the wounded warrior while he was cast as the emotionally distant ex. In a culture built on image, that shift was lethal. The fallout was immediate. Brands began approaching Remy again, offering collaborations and partnerships. She was back in headlines, not as the woman who lost an alimony case or got dumped, but as the woman who found herself again. The rebrand was complete. Eazy's fanbase remained loyal, but his public perception didn't. He was seen as colder now, more withdrawn. Interviews that once celebrated his humility now questioned his empathy. Even his music, though still strong, carried a new tone of bitterness that some audiences struggled to digest. It was a strange reversal. The woman who had once been counted out had reclaimed her power. The man who had seemed unstoppable now looked haunted. The roles had switched completely, and neither had seen it coming. Yet in private, neither felt victorious. Remy's success couldn't erase the ache of what had been lost. Eazy's silence couldn't protect him from the memories that kept him awake. They had both won and lost in equal measure, victims of their own pride, their own ambition, and the relentless public gaze that refused to let their story die. As the months rolled forward, the two never crossed paths again, at least not publicly. Their names still appeared in the same headlines, but never in the same sentence. Their legacies continued to evolve separately, yet forever intertwined. But those closest to them knew that even though the noise had faded, the story wasn't over. Because somewhere in unreleased songs and unspoken words, both still carried verses that would never see daylight. Verses too personal, too painful, too human to share. The world believed the saga had ended, that the final word had been spoken, the last documentary streamed, the last lyric written. But truth in entertainment is never final. Where this moment of illusionary peace begins, to crack when new evidence surfaces, old secrets resurface. And the world realizes that some endings are just pauses before the next storm. Peace in the entertainment world is never permanent. It's only the quiet before the next explosion. And for Easy the Block Captain and Remy Ma, that quiet began to tremble once again when the past refused to stay buried. Months after Remy's documentary had reshaped public opinion and seemingly closed the chapter, a new storm started brewing from the unlikeliest place, an internal leak from a media network that had worked closely on the production. It began with one headline on a small gossip site: deleted scenes from Remy's doc. Exposed deeper truth, what producers didn't want you to see. At first, no one took it seriously. Every hit documentary had its share of scrapped footage and ultimate edits. But within 48 hours, screenshots, audio clips, and anonymous insider messages started appearing across social media, and suddenly the entire narrative began to unravel. The leaked material wasn't explosive in the traditional sense. It was subtle, emotional, and painfully revealing. It showed conversations from the editing room, discussions between Remy's producers about which parts of her story to emphasize, and most shockingly, moments where Remy allegedly hinted at still being emotionally attached to someone she called the one who walked away when I needed him most. Fans needed no translation. They knew exactly who she meant. Within hours, the clips went viral. The internet was flooded with claims that Remy's documentary had been a carefully crafted image recovery project, not an authentic emotional confession. Some said the producers had deliberately removed moments that painted her as conflicted, vulnerable, and still emotionally tied to Easy. Others believed the leaks were fake, AI generated or planted by Easy's camp to destroy her credibility. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: the fragile peace between them had shattered again. Easy, who had remained silent since the release of his last track, suddenly became the most searched name on hip-hop media outlets. Reporters waited for a reaction, fans demanded a statement, and industry figures began speculating about his next move. But once again, he said nothing, at least not directly. Instead, 3 weeks after the leaks, Easy appeared unexpectedly. During a live-streamed rap battle event, the crowd went wild. It was his first major public appearance in months. Dressed in all black, he looked leaner, sharper, more composed. And though he didn't address the Remy controversy outright, his energy said everything. He rapped with precision, with anger, with the kind of control that only comes from channeling pain into art. Every bar hit like a message wrapped in metaphor, personal, coded, powerful. The audience felt it. The internet dissected it. Remy's name trended again. That night, fans flooded Twitter with one question: is this the response we've been waiting for? But even as Easy's resurgence ignited the scene, another revelation was quietly forming on the other side. Because Remy, now backed into a corner by the leak scandal, decided she wasn't going to let her redemption story be rewritten. Days after Easy's battle went viral, she dropped a surprise interview. No PR team, no controlled setting, just her and a respected journalist. For the first time, she addressed the leaks head-on. Calmly, she acknowledged that yes, some of the footage had been cut, but not for manipulation, for privacy. She admitted that healing didn't happen cleanly, that she still felt things she couldn't neatly package for public consumption. But she denied ever trying to deceive anyone. She spoke like a woman tired of fighting ghosts. The internet split right down the middle again. Half the audience saw raw honesty. The other half saw strategic damage control. But this time, something different happened. Easy didn't retaliate. He reposted a clip of her interview on his Instagram story with a single caption: "Respect the truth, even when it hurts." It was the first public acknowledgement of her in nearly a year. That simple gesture changed everything. For the first time since their fallout, the internet didn't explode, it exhaled. Fans interpreted it as peace, as growth, as mutual respect between two people who had finally learned to coexist without destroying each other. For a brief moment, the chaos turned into calm again. The peace in their world was never meant to last. Just as the culture began to move on, one final twist emerged, this time not from social media or gossip pages, but from the legal world. Documents surfaced showing that the alimony case, the very one that had started it all, had been quietly appealed months prior. The case wasn't fully closed after all. Legal analysts began speculating that new financial evidence had come forward, possibly changing the outcome. The internet went wild again with theories. Some claimed Remy had discovered inconsistencies that could overturn the ruling. Others suggested Easy had filed the appeal himself to protect his assets after her documentary. Success. Nobody knew the truth, but the mystery was enough to reignite the fire. Reporters camped outside court buildings. YouTube channels resurrected the story from scratch, calling it the sequel nobody expected. Commentators broke down every frame of their past interactions, searching for hidden meaning. Every lyric, every facial expression, every silence. Once again, Easy and Remy found themselves trapped in the same cycle of scrutiny they had both sworn to escape. And this time, neither had the energy to fight it. Privately, insiders claimed that both were exhausted, emotionally drained from, and no insiders claimed that both were exhausted, emotionally drained from. The endless public tug of war. Remy had retreated into producing and mentoring young artists, while Easy focused on building his label and staying away from tabloid fuel. Yet, even in their separate lanes, their shadows overlapped in the public eye. Every move Remy made was compared to Easy. Every song Easy dropped was analyzed for traces of Remy. They had become cultural mirrors, reflections of each other's pain, ambition, and pride, permanently linked in the collective imagination. By the end of that year, their story had transcended gossip. It had become a symbol, a modern myth about love, fame, and the price of pride in an era where privacy no longer exists. Documentaries dissected their journey, podcasts analyzed their downfall, and fan pages celebrated their resilience. They were no longer just two people in a broken relationship. They were characters in a cautionary tale that millions couldn't stop watching. And yet, for those who knew them personally, the ending wasn't as tragic as the headlines made it seem, because beneath the noise, both had found a strange kind of peace. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acceptance. The kind that comes from surviving something that was never meant to be public, from living through a love story that became a spectacle. There were whispers, quiet, hopeful ones, that one night, years later, they crossed paths again. Number. Cameras, no fans, no entourage. Just two people who once shared everything, now standing silently in acknowledgement of everything they had endured. No words were exchanged, but the air between them was heavy with understanding, a silent apology, a quiet respect, a recognition of the chaos they had both helped create. And that, perhaps, was their real ending, not the courtroom drama. Not the leaked footage, not the diss tracks or interviews, but a fleeting moment of humanity between two people who had once loved and hurt each other in equal measure. As the industry moved on to new scandals, new feuds, and new obsessions, the legend of Easy the Block Captain and Remy Ma remained. A reminder that even in the world of fame, money, and power, emotions are never fully controllable, and love, once ignited, never completely burns out. Their story closed not with a bang, but with a whisper. A whisper that echoed through the culture, through the streets, through the endless timelines of fans who still debated who was right, who was wrong, and who truly won. But maybe, in the end, neither did. Because fame doesn't let anyone win. It only records the wreckage. And as the final chapter of their saga faded into history, one thing became clear. No matter how far they both went, no matter how many projects they built, every time someone mentioned heartbreak, pride, or redemption in hip-hop, their names would still linger side by side, forever etched into the legend they never meant to create. This wasn't just gossip anymore. It was legacy, born from chaos, fed by emotion, and sealed by silence. The kind of story that ends but never really dies.